So, this is a bit of a series I'm doing because my mother's out of town at the moment, and I am going to be reading from the book of 1 Samuel as I was starting with her. I do this because I'm afraid that there's been a growth of idolatry toward our leaders in this country, or rather a distrust toward them. And it makes me a little bit nervous, because oftentimes we look to leaders to save us, but that's not how Christianity is supposed to really work. There can be leaders that guide us in the earthly matters, but as the prophet Samuel proclaims, God is our king. And as an overview, I'm going to read from Hannah's prayer from earlier on in the book of Samuel, mostly because it's a good overview as to what the entire book's about. So, starting in 1 Samuel chapter 2. My heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. I smile at my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. No one is holy like the Lord, for there is none beside you, nor is there any rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let no arrogance come from your mouth. For the Lord is your God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of mighty men are broken, and those who stumbled are girded with strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, and the hungry have ceased to hunger. Even the barren has borne 7, and she who has many children has become feeble. The Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and brings up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and lifts up. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the beggar from the ash heap, to set them among princes, and make them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he has set the world upon them. I will guard the feet of his saints, but the wicked shall be silent in darkness. For the strength no man shall prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken in pieces. From heaven he will thunder against them. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt his horn of his anointed. I read this part specifically because it's an overview to the book of Samuel and its story. Hannah is proclaiming that God is king, that men get their authority from God as king. With that in mind, I'm going to summarize what I read last time because, well, this is for my mother, but you can hear along too. Ever since I finished the lament of Hannah and her vow to give her son Samuel up to the Lord, I went into the story of how the Philistines stole the Ark of God from the Israelites, and how that was lost to them. Eli ended up dying from the news, and then the Philistines took the Ark into their temple before their god Dagon, and God overthrew and destroyed their idol. And then the Ark was returned to Israel. However, Samuel eventually becomes a judge over Israel and rules for a while, until eventually the Israelites get tired of his rule, and especially with his sons becoming corrupt. And so Samuel is appointed by God to give the people a king as they've demanded. However, God warns Samuel, and Samuel warns the people of Israel, that a king may not be what they actually want. God warns the Israelites that a king will take their children, will take their livestock, will take their women, will take everything from them as soldiers and servants and all these things, and they will have no true freedom. At least a secular king. And then God tries to remind them that he is good, and that he give and taketh, not like a good king, or not like a bad king, excuse me. Not like a king they wanted to appoint. So, and then we went into the story of how Saul was anointed as king. He was given his oil over his head after he was looking for some donkeys. He was then proclaimed the king of Israel. However, some people stir against his authority and rule. Saul, I'm going to say, as a reminder, is a very tall, handsome man, probably dark-haired and whatnot. So I was using the term of my mother, long, tan, and handsome, as a joke, but Saul is a good-looking, strong man. Very what you would usually think as like a king material. If you're familiar with like the term of Giga Chad, I kind of imagine that's what Saul kind of looked like, at least nowadays. It's something strong and handsome and like almost too good. Well, it's because it is too good. So, I will begin in chapter 11. You may read along with me. Then Nahash the Ammonite came up and encamped against Jabesh Gilead. And all the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, "Make a covenant with us, and we will serve you." And Nahash the Ammonite answered them, "On this condition I will make a covenant with you, that I may put out all your right eyes, and bring reproach on all Israel." Then the elders of Jabesh said to him, "Hold off for 7 days, that we may make messengers to all the territory of Israel. And then, if there's no one to save us, we will come out to you." So the messengers came to Gibeah of Saul, and told the news of hearing of his people. And all the people lifted up their voices and wept. Now there was Saul coming from behind the herd from the field, and Saul said, "What troubles the people, that they all weep?" And they all told him the words of the men of Jabesh. Then the Spirit of God came upon Saul when he heard of this news, and his anger was greatly aroused. So he took the yoke of oxen and cut them in pieces, and sent them throughout all the territory of Israel by the hands of the messengers, saying, "Whoever does not go out with Saul and Samuel to battle, so it shall be done to this oxen." And the fear of the Lord fell on the people, and they came out with one consent. When he numbered them in Bezek, the children of Israel were 300,000, and the men of Judah 30,000. So, that's 330,000 people in total. That's a very large army, especially for back then. And they said to the messengers who came, "Thus you who shall say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, 'Tomorrow, by the time the sun is hot, you shall have help.'" Then the messengers came and reported it to the men of Jabesh, and they were glad. Therefore the men of Jabesh said, "Tomorrow we will come out to you, and you may do with us whatever seems good to you." So it was on the next day that Saul put the people in their companies, and came into the midst of the camp in the morning watch, and killed Ammonites until the heat of the day. And it happened that those who survived were scattered, and not 2 of them were left together. I imagine victory cries for all the Israelites. Then the people said to Samuel, "Who is he who said Saul shall reign over us? Bring them in, that we may put them to death." Now, they're saying Saul shall rule over us. They're making the claim. They're saying people questioning him, the rebels, they're putting them to the death. But Saul said, "Not a man shall be put to the death this day, for the Lord God has accomplished salvation in Israel." Then Samuel said to the people, "Come, let us go to Gilgal and renew the kingdom there." So all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul the king before the Lord in Gilgal. There they made sacrifices of peace offerings before the Lord. And there Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced greatly. So, Saul's looking pretty good right now, isn't he? He ends up saving the people of Israel. Well, a little bit tyrannically. It's as God warns earlier. Saul demands a huge army from the people of Israel. 330,000 men. That's a lot, especially for populations back then. He probably was scraping by with as many men he could get against the Ammonites. So, with that in mind, Saul may have found victory, but it was probably at a huge cost. Anyways, now Samuel said to all Israel, "Indeed, I have heeded your voice and all that you've said to me, and have made a king over you. And now here is the king walking before you, and I am old and gray-headed, and look, my sons are with you. I have walked before you from my childhood to this day. Here I am. Witness against me before the Lord and before his anointed. Whose ox have I taken, and whose donkey have I taken? Or whom have I cheated? Whom have I oppressed? Or from whose hand have I received any bribe from which to blind my eyes? I will restore it to you. And they said, You have not cheated us or oppressed us, nor have you taken anything from any man's hand. And they said to him, or then he said to them, The Lord is witness against you, and his anointed is witness this day, that you have not found anything in my hand. And they answered, He is witness. Then Samuel said to the people, It is the Lord who raised Moses and Aaron, and brought your fathers up from the land of Egypt. Now therefore stand still, that I may reason with you before the Lord concerning all the righteous acts of the Lord, which he did to you and your fathers. When Jacob had gone into Egypt, and your fathers cried out to the Lord sent Moses and Aaron, who brought your fathers out of Egypt and made them dwell in this place. And when they forgot the Lord their God, he sold them to the hands of Sisera, commander of the army of Hazor, into the hands of the Philistines, into the hands of the king of Moab, and they fought against them. Then they cried out to the Lord, and said, We have sinned, because we have forsaken the Lord, and served the Baals and Ashtoreths. But now deliver us from the hand of our enemies, and we will serve you. And the Lord sent Jerubbaal, Bedan, Jephthah, and Samuel, and delivered you out of the hands of your enemies on every side, and you dwelt in safety. And then, when you saw that Nahash, king of the Ammonites, came against you, you said to me, No, but a king shall reign over us, when the Lord your God was your king. Now therefore, here is your king, whom you have chosen, and whom you desired. And take note, the Lord has set a king over you. If you fear the Lord, and serve him, and obey his voice, and do not rebel against the commandment of the Lord, then both you and the king who reigns over you will continue following the Lord your God. However, if you do not obey the voice of the Lord, but rebel against the commandments of the Lord, then the hand of the Lord will be against you, as it was against your fathers. Now therefore stand and see that this great thing which the Lord will do before your eyes. Is today not the wheat harvest? I will call to the Lord, and he will send thunder and rain, that you may perceive and see that your wickedness is great, which you have done in the sight of the Lord, in asking a king for yourselves. So Samuel called to the Lord, and the Lord sent thunder and rain that day, and all the people greatly feared the Lord and Samuel. And all the people said to Samuel, Pray for your servants to the Lord your God, that we may not die, for we have added to our sins the evil of asking a king for ourselves. Then Samuel said to the people, Do not fear. You have done all this wickedness. Yet do not turn aside from your following the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. And do not turn aside, for then when you would go after empty things which cannot profit or deliver, for they are nothing, the Lord will not forsake his people, for his great name's sake, because it has pleased the Lord to make you his people. Moreover, as for me, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord in ceasing to pray for you. But I will teach you the good and right way. Only fear the Lord, and serve him in truth in all your heart, for consider the great things he has done for you. But if you still do wickedly, you shall be swept away, both you and your king. With that in mind, what do we take away from Samuel's coronation of Saul? It's a little bit, if I was Saul, I'd be like, what? This is supposed to be about my coronation. Why are you making it seem like this is a bad thing? Well, Samuel's making a point here. The Israelites sinned against God in asking for a king instead of worshiping God as their king. So, God warns them, you may have sinned here, but as long as you remain faithful, this is going to work out. But if they don't remain faithful, then they will be delivered into the hands of their enemies, as it happened in the book of Judges as well as Numbers. So, what do we take from this? I take that God has an ultimate authority over rulers. That we should not put our trust and safety in rulers. Because they're ultimately powerless when it comes to the way the world works. They can do things, they can rule things as, like, they can make coinage, they can raise up armies, all these things, but what they truly can't do is have complete control over circumstances. And God's trying to warn the Israelites that's exactly what's going to happen. That if they try to find any meaning behind things, or their own knowledge, or their own conscience, or their own prowess, it's going to result in nothing, because they will become powerless. But if the Lord your God is with you, if you remain faithful and love the Lord your God with all your heart, then God will be at your side. That is what God is telling the Israelites through the voice of Samuel. Which is why I often have a hard time when it comes to all this stuff with either people end times mongering, or mongering about rulers, or fearing about the people in power. Because ultimately, as the Apostle Peter makes the point of, God, it's only because God allows those people in power, ultimately either to destroy them, or to have them lead the people. He also gives humans a bit of free will. We often choose our own leaders. Here God chose Saul, but he chose Saul for a specific purpose here. God saw that the Israelites wanted a strong, good-looking man to be their ruler, and so he gave it to them. But he's also warning them about Saul. If you notice, Saul came from the land of Gilead. Gilead. If you know anything about the book of Judges, near the end of the book of Judges, the Benjamites of Gilead end up raping a Levite's concubine. And eventually the Levite spreads the concubine's body parts across all the tribes of Israel and calls a war against all the tribes of Benjamin. Funnily enough, the Benjamites are exterminated, and then all the Benjamite women end up having to marry from other tribes, or even some Gentiles as well. So, often that means the tribe of Benjamin was a little bit of half-breed. Not very looked kind upon, because they were like the little brother of all the other tribes. And so God chooses a very unpopular kind of person to be the ruler of Israel. He did it on purpose, I'm sure. He knew what the lands of Gilead were like. And yet the Israelites kind of forget their own history. They forget what the Benjamites had done, and they're like, oh, this is this wonderful, handsome man here who will lead us. Well, they'll soon be mistaken. Saul may have delivered the people of Israel from the hands of their enemies, but with both great cost and also great cost to his own soul. See, Saul has leadership material. He's humble because he was near his flock of sheep when he was told about the invasion. He's hardworking. He doesn't like pride or fame, at least not at first. As we see, he's actually embarrassed to become king earlier on, when he ends up hiding behind some of the armory and whatnot, because he doesn't really want to be king. Those are attributes that you would think are very good in a ruler, and I would often agree, and I think Saul shows some of that. However, God's warning to Samuel also comes on to Saul. Saul has to remain faithful himself, because he now represents the people of Israel. And at first he does well, but I don't think he was ready for what was to come for him. I think God wanted to challenge him and show him, now that you're ruler, you have to show a different kind of faith. And unfortunately for Saul, he doesn't cut it out. He's not cut out for it. Sorry for the stuttering there. Saul does not cut it. He represents what we all think an ideal ruler is. Someone who doesn't want the throne. Someone handsome, strong, has prowess, not afraid to lead his people, brave. All those things. What people would often say with conventional wisdom was a good ruler. But God disagrees. Oh, does he disagree? With that message in mind, I'm going to end it here. Next recording I will continue into chapter 13 when we see Saul's downfall. Until then, may the grace of God be with you, and as brothers and sisters in Christ, I will be praying for all of you who listen, and may never